Hello, everybody, and welcome back. And here today with me is Eva. Eva, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. In our series of the 14 negative reactions what these reflex points causes, we have in the past talked about various points. Today, we're going to focus about the spinal reflex cause, also known as the spinal nerves. And throughout Sabri, we always trying to avoid it. So as usual, I start first to talk about these reflex points. You can see right here. This is right there. These 6 points most of the time is what we're trying to avoid. In the past, we talked about other reflex points, such as this one right here, and then the cartilage and the bladder meridian point 13. That was lung reflex points. But today, here we see the pink bar. That pink bar is where we focus to have the saddle contact. And just like minefields, little grenades, when we go off, something happens. And that's how I always look at these little stars, which indicate these negative reflex points. So why do saddles always, for thousands of years, bypassed these negative reflex points or spinal nerves? Well, just like when we have something on our back, if you carry a backpack, it's important that the backpack is level and we don't want to sit it directly on the bone. So it's not just the bone itself, it's actually the little more muscle what gives us the strength. Let me fast forward to show you what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the multifidus muscle. Okay, we do not want to put any kind of pressure through this area. And then, like you see here, the spinal processes, you also have the transverse processes right here. And you can see how they come up to a little point. Now, we have a very hard time to feel that, but we definitely do not want to touch on that. Here you can see from the side, when indicated with the red arrow, when the spinal processes touch. Now, we call this as kissing spine. And horses have this protector, and the protector is called calcification, and they glue it together. Now, it doesn't hurt anymore, but the horse doesn't move anymore. And then right here, you see these protrusions. These are the transverse processes. And then you notice the hole right there. Out of this hole, this is where you can see it right there. The nerves, blood vessels, etc., comes out. Here you see the hole where all the nerves goes through. So we want to make sure that the saddle not only clears the nuclear system, here we see it, we want to make sure it stays away from the multifidus muscle, the transverse, and the nerves. Now, over the thousands of years we have been on horseback riding, we have sit bareback on the horse. And our seat bones, funny enough, are wide enough to bypass this area. So if I'm just grabbing a pelvis what we have here, so male or female pelvis, you will sit on these parts, and these parts here are wide enough to have the space to you do not sit on the multifidus, spinal process, or transfer, or on the nerve endings. Where it becomes a big problem, and I see this a lot in our industry, is when we put anything on what pulls tight something, such as a bareback pad or treeless saddle. Now, why is that so critical, and why is that so bad? As I just showed you in my picture with the pelvis, it bridges the spine. But as soon as we strap something over it, we put direct pressure on all those 3 points I just mentioned: processes, transfer, also the nuclear ligament system, multifidus, and on the spinal nerves. So the fact that we pull something like a string down, that's where we kind of shortchange the protection to the horse. Then when we put stirrups on it, the stirrup leather is normally attached to a clip or to a bar. If we look at this stirrup bar right here, so you can see all the force of the rider hangs here. On a treed saddle, which means what has a saddle tree, it is attached via rivets. And you can see then when the pressure comes down, it has a bracket over the withers. And you can see here again, we have lots of clearance for the spine. So throughout traditional saddle making, from army saddle to medieval time saddles to Western saddles, we always have and protect the spinal nerves. I was just floored, absolutely floored, to see how the horse can react, and to the part where they actually hollow their back. And what's so bad if the horse hollows the back? Well, when I look at this little guy here, so this is what I got from a body worker. I really like this because you can push around it, you can see inside, and you can see how the spinal processes fall backwards and stay straight and fall forward again. So when the horse's head goes down, I don't want to break his head too much, but when this head goes down, the nuchal ligament system lifts this spine up and all these processes come apart. But if I hit the spinal processes, that back muscle tightens and it goes this way, goes the opposite. And then this is what I was showing earlier. We have kissing spine. And when the hind leg is that far out, that's really, really tough on the horse's back. We want to quite the opposite. We're trying to achieve what the horse does when the head goes down. We want them to go up. How do I get this to lift so that the back comes up? How is that possible? By tightening the abdominal muscle.
Cool.
And when the core goes tight, the back comes up, and now the haunches come under. But not if I put pressure on these 5 points: nuchal ligaments, spinal processes, spinal transverse, multifidus, and the nervous system. So this is what this topic is today. From a saddle making point of view, it's absolutely crucial that we stay off the spine. We cannot continue putting saddles on. Here we got a saddle, one is super narrow. That wouldn't fit a cat. I mean, this is ridiculous. So why does the saddle industry make these type of saddles? Well, folks, I don't know. I have no idea what their thought process is behind these manufacturers. Maybe they call them the close pin effect. In other words, they want to pin the saddle on the spine to get security, but it's so unhealthy. And if I like to pass this now to you, because I can always talk about what I have to do to make sure that the saddle stays off the horse's spine. And I find our conversation always so interesting because you put great analysis and you can say, hey, as a rider, we have the same issues. And I can't fit a saddle to a horse ever if the rider has pain. But as anything else, when you tell stories where people relate it to themselves, they can emphasize how important it is to get off the horse's spine. So please jump in here.
I would love, because I really like what you just said a moment ago. I would love for you to bring that horse model back if you could. The flexible, the malleable one. So what you were saying here with the transverse spinal processes and also the dorsal spinal processes, when we get to that kissing spine area, that's a lack of engagement through the hindquarters as well as the core. So the core cannot engage. If the core cannot engage properly and doesn't do it often enough, then that spine is going to continue to, the spinal processes will continue to get closer, which is where that back hollows out. So now there's two ways, as you were just saying, if the saddle is ill-fitted for the horse and also for the rider, and if the rider is not fit enough, and we'll just say biomechanically in the right areas and in the right positions at the right time to communicate effectively, then it will obviously, as you just showed us, have an effect on this horse. And so now strengthening the multifidus muscles in both horse and rider are extremely paramount, because these are really deep stabilizer core muscles that are essential for our spinal movement. And while their spine has different flexibilities and movements than ours does in certain ways, there is definitely an overlap in strengthening the core, also known as the top line, as well as engaging the abdominal muscles underneath for the horse. But when it comes to us specifically, we also must have those same strong muscles. And it's interesting because when you mentioned multifidus today, I was just filming an exercise just the other day, which I actually, now that you push me in this direction, I need to release it because it's perfect for this conversation. And it's also a weird movement that most people probably haven't done in that quadruped position, which a horse is on all four. So when it comes to us, if we're out of alignment of anywhere from the head all the way down from towards the hips, we'll just say this, on horseback, then it will have an effect on what our body is doing. And it's also going to turn off a certain area of our body. And I say off, it just means a lack of engagement. So when we're on the horse, we want to really be as naturally aligned, right? Aligned is also depending upon the person, but we can also always make adjustments to that alignment. But as you were saying with the book bag initially, if we're sitting to one side just slightly, let's just say we're even through our seat bones, our ischium, right, which you showed us early in that pelvic analogy, but we're not even through a shifted shoulder to the right or a rotated shoulder to the left, it will definitely have an effect on everything else down below. As you were going back to, or as I go back to where the stirrups are connected, that's going to then have a shift in that area, which is then going to cause saddle slippage. So if we have all of those different things that take place within this complex but also pretty simple situation with us riding with the horse, we must communicate with them one thing at a time, and we also must understand what our body is doing and where it is. And it's okay for riders, and I want to continue to bring this thought process to the forefront, which is it's okay to go back in order to launch yourself forward. And so sometimes you may need to take a month or a week or two to do some of the basic work again in order for you to make sure that you are now stepping forward and doing the best that you can for not only yourself, but also your horse. Because if you're crooked, then you're going to continue to make your horse further or bring that same physiological component that you have towards your horse. So I hope that that makes sense. But let's just go into the multifidi muscle for the human for just a moment in terms of how we can strengthen and or align it. It's a muscle that we can't typically feel by typical palpation, but I want people to think of if someone was to pinch their fingers really hard in between your shoulder blades on your back, would that feel good? The answer is most likely no. So if we're in that position and we have that, we're going to naturally pull our shoulder blades back, extend through our collarbone, and then we're going to round or arch our back, similar to what would happen with the horse if it felt that uncertain and uncomfortable feeling. So in order to strengthen it, I would say, or to lengthen it, we may need to either stretch it. That's something that an assessment can do personally. But in this situation, an exercise in prone position laying down like a swimmer or a Superman, which is lifting both arms and legs off the floor at the same time, or alternating that, will help to engage this area of our body, also work in the posterior chain of the spine and the core musculature. Uh-oh, you're on mute.
What I like on our conversation earlier, I have sometimes rider who complain about hip pain or sciatic pain, and we talk about how the pinching in the nerve comes, and it comes all the way down to the hip. So I was on pins and needles here, listen, because I have a lot of times where the saddle shifts, and I was wondering why, because the saddle is brand new, it looks nice and even, and the horse doesn't look as uneven, but the shift could come from the rider because of what you just explained. So I find that fascinating. Tell me a little bit about pinched nerve. How I mean, I have back pain, and I said, okay, I have something wrong with it. I say with my hips, for example, right? And then you come up and say, oh, that comes actually somewhere else. Would you elaborate a little bit on that?
Absolutely. I think it goes back to, let's just take this analogy with what you have on screen here with the horse, right? Because as I've noticed over the years that we would like most riders would like to learn about the horse anatomy and they're interested in it. So let's just take the horse anatomy and then apply it back to human. So in this case, the foramens, however you say that, foramina, the areas in between the spine where the nerves come out of, those can be pinched if the spine is out of, if it is consistently, or if it twists or moves out of alignment for in an uncertain or unfamiliar way that the spine can handle. So in this case, as you're looking at this kissing spine thing here, where the dorsal top part, the dorsal transverse processes get closer and closer to each other, that's going to have an effect on the nerves that are underneath, which then have to get through. So as you can see here, on the closer to the right side, there's a larger foramen than there is on the left side as it gets closer and closer to the left portion of that picture. So there's most likely going to have an effect on how your horse's back moves, and then also the flexion and extension that it's able to have, because there is a pinching going on, which then will lead to a limb discrepancy and or issue with extension and flexion through that. It works the same way with us, right? So it could, in this case, and I'm not a horse anatomist, so I don't understand this process the same exact way as I do humans, but there is a correlation. That nerve connection that this horse has with this pinched nerve here could affect them all the way up to the neck, and it also could go closer down towards or closer backwards, caudally towards the hip area. So when it comes to us, we could sleep wrong, we could overuse the muscles in, let's just say we're doing barn chores. It could be work, it could be driving. If you cross your leg when you're driving, if you put your leg up while you're driving, it could be a host of different things that lead to misalignment in our body. And most importantly, what we want to understand or to gather is we can't always be symmetrical. It's just not possible. Most people don't drive with 2 feet, they drive with one more than the other. So there's going to be some dominant, same thing with the hand. But we want to be mentally aware and physically aware of what we do and how we can minimize those things, especially when they have a major effect on us. So let's go back to the first example of sleeping wrong. You're sleeping out of alignment. You might have gone camping. You might have slept at a hotel because you're traveling. You might have just got a new pillow and you're really not kind of settled into it, or a new bed. You sleep wrong. Your head could be in this way. Your head could be that way. Or if you sleep on your stomach, that's a whole nother conversation for a different day. But those things take us out of alignment. If you think about sleeping at least 4, bare minimum, right? 4 hours all the way up to 8 hours in that type of position, that's your body molding to what it's been giving at that time. Now you wake up and you want to be extremely symmetrical for you and your horse, and your body's saying that's not how this works. That could lead to a nerve that is now has more pressure on it because of the time frame that it's been under, and that just continues to lead to other situations. Shoulders, mid back, low back is a big one as well as the hip area. So if we're sitting in a lordotic area, position, rounded spine, we're sitting more so on our glutes, and we're not really focused on posture, or let's just say a more comfortable alignment, then it will definitely have an effect on things, because there's an extension somewhere else and there's a shortening somewhere else. So from the cervical all the way down to the lumbar area of our body. So hopefully that makes sense when I say pinched nerves and how they consistently affect us in our lives. Most of us just aren't aware of exactly what that feels like in a cognitive way. We understand our body doesn't feel good, but we don't know how to get out of that. And that's where people go and see other professionals for that.
Yeah, no, very well explained. And lots of things come to my mind listening to you, because I remember my old masters, they always says, you only learn how to ride if you sweep a lot. And the riddle was, or not the riddle, the poem was, Reiter merkt euch auf allen Wegen, Reiten lernst du nur durch Fegen. It says, riders, remember, you only learn how to ride if you sweep a lot. And we have these old, massive brooms that look like a witch's broom, made out of twigs. And they, to this day, still use them. They're heavy. And you have this core strengthening exercise, and then you clean your barn and you brush your horse, you're really mobile, you're really getting lubricated here, right? So listen to how difficult in the world we live now. Why? Because we have machine who sweep out, we have helpers who clean, Sometimes I even have grooms who put the horses in my hand with the bridle on it. All I have to do with the mounting block, next what I see is a crane what puts me on it that I don't have to move.
Yep.
So we become less and less mobile because we have also devices like this. That must be a pain in the butt for you because you see people non-stop.
Forward head posture. Yep.
Yeah, you see even kids growing up with that posture. Right? So it's a huge problem, as we know. And I love these webinars with you and
Same.
also with farriers, because we look at two ways. There's one saying, build the horse from the bottom up, which means good shoeing. And then there's another book which I refer a lot to from Udo Berger, who wrote in 1903 a book called Der Reiter formt das Pferd. The rider is forming the horse. And if I have that posture this way, or like you said, this way, or because of the bed, the pillow, the driving, and I haven't exercised, I haven't taken the time to align my body.
Yep.
That will translate directly to the horse. And for me, as a saddle maker, I always visualize a static object in the middle of a Jenga tower. So that if you don't start the Jenga tower with even nice, you know what a Jenga tower is, right?
Absolutely. Oh yeah.
So now I have the bottom good. I put maybe a cell phone in between, and then I build on there, but I make them crooked, and I make eventually the whole tower falls over. Okay, and no matter what I do, no matter how crooked I make this, and how to trying to balance the crooked person up there. We all play an important part. Every little building block in the Jenga tower. And when I'm thinking of the saddle, I have only one simple thing to do. I have to stay off the landmines here.
Right.
I need to focus that the saddle sits on the pink area. The girth is always girthed up in an area. If you like the short billets in this area or in between this area, and nowhere else. That's my job. But how the horses shoot and how balanced you come on top is a massive responsibility. And this is why it's a riding sport, and it's not a riding, I don't even know what to use, but the opposite of sport, Aoife. Launching.
Hobby. I don't know.
I have no idea. This is an activity. There is movement. And if you want to bring your stiffness into the saddle, the saddle doesn't care. The saddle is just a dead object. Who does care is your body long term and the horse's body long term. And because Aoife and I have the same thing, we don't do this because we can make multiple full amounts of money. We do it because we enjoy and love what we do, because we can help the horse and help the rider. My hands are limited, and this is why I really appreciate, Aoife, that you can give the stories and the answers to help the rider to become more mobile. So
I want to add to what you just said there, based on when you mentioned the neck and the forward head posture, because if we take it quickly to the horse's neck, and when their head is higher, their back has a natural inclination to be in an arched position, a hollowed position. Spinal processes closer to each other. But when they're able to relax and get their neck down, and we're not on their mouth as much with the reins, then it's easier for them to have a natural conformation that leads them to an extension, which is exactly what we want. Now that you mentioned that forward head posture, because horses don't look at screens nearly as much as we do at this stage, but when we are in that uncharacteristic building block, like you mentioned just a second ago as well, that Jenga tower, if it's not aligned properly, then it's going to have an effect. And I was in a lesson last week in the arena, and we were talking about certain other riders in this group environment where they were looking down. And as I could see, I am there with the instructor, and we're turning around and we're watching, we're making adjustments collectively. when the rider lifted their head up, we could also see how that affected the horse's head and their back almost immediately. And it took me to something where I'll study this at some point in the near future, but how our head position literally has an effect all the way down to our seat bones. And so when you said that forward head posture, just gave me that thought process of, man, it really is amazing how many different components that have an effect on those things. So if we can teach riders, if I could continue to teach riders how to better align even just their neck, right? And get them from this position to this position and getting their chin closer back and the back of their head further back as well, it will definitely have an effect on how they're sitting and how they interface with what we're talking about today, which is these meridian points, these trigger points here. Right, with the horse, and making sure that they have the right flexibility, flexion and extension within their spine.
Yeah. As always, Eva, thank you for your time, and I learn so much every time I talk to you. And it reminds me on my old master who always says, riding is a king sport. Ride proud, sit tall, put your head up, look up. But what do you see most people do, especially when we think we focus? We look down to the horse. If we need to give him with our vision the guidelines to where the horse needs to step, absolutely ridiculous, right?
Right.
So very well said. When you were saying, I immediately was going with my head back and trying to get it up straight right here. So I can't wait to talk to you next time. Have a great rest of the day, and
thank you.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
For the next one. Thank you now. Bye.
Bye.